throughout every age, the spiritually minded have asked the age-old question, is the tunnel of light that we see when we pass a trap? So today, it is my honor to explain what that tunnel of light that we see when we pass is, and if it's a trap. If we want to fully answer this question, we have to begin with define trap. Trap would imply that there is an external force that is intentionally recycling our souls here on earth. Or trap would imply that there is an external force that is intentionally keeping our soul here in the third dimension, so that we are reincarnating over and over again in what I call spiritual amnesia, where we do not progress. Our soul does not evolve beyond this third dimensional earth experience. So when it comes to the white light that some see when they pass, and whether or not that white light is in fact a trap that is meant to simply just take us back and recycle us into the earth realm, we would need to understand that at the moment that we pass, there's actually more than just one form of light. White light is one of the different kinds of spectrums of light that is there and present. So, white light is best known as what I would call the false light. If you'd like to watch my video on the false light, you can watch that. It's called the false light deception. And why white light specifically is known for being a part of some sort of lower consciousness trap would be because white light is a very stark, divided, and fragmented part of the light spectrum. So when we're talking about the lowest gradient, the lowest quality of light when it comes to our consciousness, that would be depicted as the white light. Think of fluorescent lights. Are fluorescent lights pretty? No. And fluorescent lights are very bleak even. If you just do a guided meditation where you're meditating on the thought of fluorescent light, you can start connecting with this on your own so that you can start feeling what type of light that is actually going to be producing within your own consciousness. And what you may find is that white light is one that is supremely fragmented. So white light isn't the only gradient. It's not the only spectrum of light that we can access. It's just the one that is most prominent because it's the lowest consciousness bandwidth of light. But just because white light is the lowest bandwidth of light does not mean it's the only one. There are different qualities of light that are representative of different bandwidths or dimensions of consciousness. So when a being is accessing and perceiving white light, they are accessing and perceiving the lowest bandwidth, the lowest level of consciousness when they move on. And that's why it's been known and it's become synonymous. It's become very connected with it being a trap. It's because it's the lowest consciousness form of light. So, like I said, there's a whole spectrum of light that has different qualities to it. And those different qualities represent different dimensions. And whatever our frequency is, our frequency will be able to access that. Why would our frequency be able to access that? It's because our frequency will be able to perceive it. Consciousness cannot access something if it cannot perceive it. So our frequency raises, and when it raises, now we start being able to perceive more of the light spectrum. When we're able to perceive more of the light spectrum, white light no longer becomes the dominant attraction of our consciousness. So this isn't something that we have to fear, and this isn't something that the lower mind or the ego has to be in charge of knowing and navigating through, because it is our frequency. It is what we have already cultivated through the work that we have done in our life towards healing, towards integration. So it is the inner work that has produced our frequency that will from there be able to access and align with its matching, with its corresponding dimension. So our frequency will be able to perceive certain gradients of light, and those gradients of light are a representative of the realm of the dimension of consciousness that they are. The more integrated that light will look, it will be able to be of a higher frequency, a higher dimension. That's why at the lowest levels of light, they're really fractured, they're very bleak, and they're usually when we're able to ask a medium to commune with someone. When we're able to still commune with someone who has crossed over, they didn't go far. The white light represents the third dimension mechanical reincarnation cycle. It's considered a trap because it has no conscious free will. It is purely based off of karma, and the being is pulled into this light based off of how disoriented their body, mind, spirit is. This can be caused by religious belief systems that feed off of fear, heavy emotional baggage, and full identification with our old life. So it traps you because it chooses for you. It chooses like a high power magnet. Only that high power magnet is the karma of what is required for you to become more aware. But that is not the only light that is present. It really just depends on the soul itself. The different colored lights represent the belief systems that exist in the fourth dimension. You can watch my video, The Fourth Dimension Explained, to understand those dimensions better. Now, the champagne or rose-colored light represents the higher frequency realm of the fifth dimension. That is also where Rosicrucians get their name from. It's the rose-colored field of the heart center. So if the white light is the lowest vibrating, most unconscious form of light that is perceived on this light spectrum, then what that would mean to us as a consciousness when we are being pulled into the gravity of that light would be that we have a corresponding vibration. We have a match to that realm. What would make us a vibrational match to something that's highly fragmented and highly fractured? Well, if our body, mind, spirit, if our psyche was highly fragmented or highly fractured. So our vibrational match with that light would be at that point, it would be like a high-powered magnet pulling into its gravity, some like little leaf. It would be as though we do not know thyself, because if we do not know thyself, then we would be in a spiritual amnesia. And spiritual amnesia is the perfect way to describe the pathway of this tunnel. It would be such a stark, forensic, fractured light that what it's doing is just attracting like to like. So it would be such an unconscious, amnesiac version of reincarnation because it is done not consciously. It is not a conscious creation. So what you see is the higher the consciousness of a being, the more free will they're able to access. And with that more free will, they're able to be co-creators in their process. They're even able to have more say in what they reincarnate into, if they reincarnate at all. Because at that point, when you're vibrating at such a high frequency and you're such a conscious or awakened being, you can choose to either stay in a higher realm, or you can choose to bring your liberated being into a cycle of reincarnation where other people are asking for that level of assistance to awaken. That's why I call it spiritual amnesia. And a spiritual awakening. Because even though terms and terminology can leave us in boxes and paradigms, it's still, at the end of the day, the most accurate terminology for what we're actually going through. It's this ongoing spiritual awakening process, and that blossoms into a higher awakened consciousness. When a being has that level of awakening to where they're able to, with their fully liberated being, still choose to go into a third dimension and go into a lower level experience, they're not coming in with the same level of karma as another being. Now, what's really important to know is that not everyone is entrapped inside the unconsciousness of this physical realm the same. There's different layers of karma, but we could look at that as there's different levels of entrapment, of attachment to this realm. So even though we love to be really PC about everything, the discernment in this topic is very vital because it has nothing to do with superiority and everything to do with discernment. So when we're looking at something like an esoteric teaching that is teaching about how our consciousness is entirely asleep inside the material physical realm, what we're looking at is the lowest level of consciousness here. It's so low that it is entirely trapped in matter, in Maya, in the illusion. And from there, there's a spectrum still. There's a scale. And within that scale, now we're going up each octave or up each note. And so our consciousness, the more it awakens, becomes less entrapped in matter. And now you could see that we can start existing here in the physical realm and inside our body and be in this world, but not of it. And when we're in this world and not of it, what that's basically representing is our unattachment to it. So the more we unattach ourselves from this realm, the more we're able to awaken and still be a part of it. We're still able to exist here, but that we're not fully of it, because to be fully of it would mean that we are lost. We are completely in amnesia to where we are over-identified with matter, with earth. So this isn't something to either push against or pull against. And quite frankly, the light that we see when we pass isn't even something that is meant to be resisted. It's not something to push against or to pull against. Because if you are pushing or pulling, your consciousness is in resistance. Resistance will strengthen the bond. So it's imbued with fear. That's what the resistance of pushing and pulling is entailed. The fear creates disorientation that makes it go through unnecessary realms in the fourth dimension. Mysticism has many names for these realms. They are known as bardos. Gnosticism refers to these realms as archons. These realms represent dominant emotional temperaments. They represent an emotional theme. If we are too attached to our material possessions or the material realm, that is an archon, or realm we would vibrationally match up to. But not everyone has to go through each bardo. For instance, the Gospel of Mary has highlighted a very obscure realm, the realm of overzealous martyrdom. Being overzealous in martyrdom is an emotional temperament that can trap a soul traveling through these realms. This may seem totally unrelated in this new age, but this is where the origins of archons tricking us into reincarnating came from, because that is a temperament that is dominant in fundamentalism. But if you have resolved these themes before the afterlife, then the tunnel of white light and the whole fourth dimension will not be an issue for you to navigate, because your frequency will be high enough for your higher self to take over from there. If you'd like to know more about what I mean by the higher self taking over, you can watch my video, The Endgame to a Spiritual Awakening. The only reason people fear the tunnel of light is because of attachment. All of this is represented by the tarot card, the Devil. Notice how the cuffs that are encompassing the wrists of both the man and the woman on that card are well oversized, and their wrists can simply just move themselves out of the cuffs should they wish to. That is the deepest esoteric depiction of this realm. And specifically, when our consciousness is addicted to the physical experiences here. So much so that we become over imbalanced to identifying with the ego. So what that means is that this whole process of awakening does not need to be feared, because at a certain point, it's something that we effortlessly slip our hands and wrists out of those cuffs so that we're not trapped, so that we're not addicted and attached to this earth realm, to being a physical ego, living as just an identified human being with our everyday consciousness. So when we're over-attached to our identity as an ego here on earth, and we're over-identified as physical matter, that is when we start incarnating and reincarnating over again, lost in our amnesia, because we have lowered our vibration so that it is a complete vibrational match to matter, to inertia, and that there's no difference between our consciousness and the vibration of matter and inertia. But once we start to awaken now, our frequency is what is going to be able to now access different dimensions and access different qualities and gradients of light. And even should we do as much in this lifetime towards inner work so that we completely lose all attachments organically, then what we'll see is that now there is no gradients of light to even perceive. There is only what we can call a clear light, and what Tibetan Buddhists call a clear light. And when it comes to this clear light quality, now we have taken all projections of the mind back. We are not perceiving any forms of light, because we realize we ourselves are the light and we ourselves are the emptiness. So there is nowhere to actually leave to, and there is no light that actually is drawing us like a magnet into its realm or tunnel, because we have nothing that needs to reincarnate. There's no attachment whatsoever. Our consciousness is still perceiving these different gradients of light. There's nothing wrong with that. But should we wish to actually end reincarnation altogether, whether it's in a higher density realm or a lower density realm or a realm in between, if we just wish to surrender to our higher self, then what we would truly do is be able to withdraw our consciousness from all forms and all bandwidths of light so that we can truly experience who we are at our very core, so that we are no longer in object consciousness. In object consciousness, you need an object. And when you have an object, you have something to objectify. And so we are objectifying all these different gradients of light. And when we're objectifying them, we can access them. And they might be higher or they might be lower, but they're still a part of object consciousness. So clear light is simply no form of light, because we know that all is light. So I know that could sound paradoxical, but clear light essentially knowing that we are the light and that there is no such thing as any form of objects. All of them are ultimately illusory. Does illusion mean it's fake? No. Does illusion mean it's not real? No. Illusion means it's made of light. Ancient spiritual teachings were never using the term illusion to mean that something wasn't real. Ancient spiritual teachings were using the term illusion to describe the state of our consciousness when we are completely unawakened, when we are completely asleep and attached to mind. So what illusion meant was when we are asleep in Maya, when we are asleep in matter. And so when we awaken, we're raising our frequency, we're becoming less attached. Now, how do we become less attached? Because now we're starting to see that that is our true work, and that's what we're responsible for, not the stuff that comes after that. Well, the good news is that everything that we heal in this lifetime is something that makes that passing of the baton to our higher self, once we move on, way easier. Because the more baggage we have here, the more trauma, the more soul loss that we have on our time of passing, that will end up being different layers of demons, or let's call them the shadow, that we have to face anyways. There's always some form of balancing that happens. Balancing simply means that we are facing something to either acknowledge it or learn from it whatever we can. So when we're balancing something, it's simply us being able to recalibrate, us being able to tip the scales of karma back in the favor of neutralizing something. So the more that we're able to become aware during this life, we're just naturally, that awareness, naturally that healing of the emotional body, of the mental body, of the physical body, of the spirit, all of that creates unattachment because our frequency raises. That's what integration does. And so what that means is that we're not faced with such heavy loads of navigating after this. So a lot of times people are very concerned because they heard about the white light and how it's a trap, and then all the things that they're going to have to encounter and face beyond that trap. That's if you have a lot of unfinished business in the emotional body, a lot of heavy karma inside the mental body. So the more that we're unconscious, once again, that's going to lead us up to things that the Tibetan Book of the Dead has looked at and straight up said are demons. What Gnosticism and Hermeticism have called archons. What other teachings have all described in their own different way, with their own different terms, but still the same overall core concept. And what that overall core concept is that whichever way you look at this, whatever mystical system that you're going through, there's some sort of thing that's representative of the shadow or of the karma that needs to be faced if it has not been faced while we're still here doing the work. So if the white light represents the lowest vibrating light, and that also represents spiritual amnesia, what's causing that spiritual amnesia? It's caused by addiction. Addiction creates a spiritual amnesia. Why does addiction create a spiritual amnesia? Because addiction is caused by soul loss. If you'd like to know more about soul loss, you can watch my video on it. What is soul loss? Soul loss fragments us. Soul loss not only fragments us, but it keeps us now in a state of addiction, even if we're not aware of that. It keeps us in addiction because we're not whole. So we don't know this is unconscious, but that lack of wholeness is what causes addiction. So that is what causes spiritual amnesia. Addiction is what causes spiritual amnesia, and spiritual amnesia is what's being represented as the white light. So what we would need to do is to really heal the emotional body. We would need to help the emotional body so that it can be balanced and create more unity with the mental body, with the physical body, and with the spiritual body. So the emotional body is why this age that we're in has so much light shed on it. It's because it is the most underdeveloped part of our energy field. The emotional body is the one that we can all, regardless of our gender, look at what needs the most assistance within us. Because trapped emotions, unprocessed emotions, are causing the willpower to be suppressed in a way where we are creating our own reincarnations here simply because we have unfinished business. And that unfinished business is us trying to raise our emotional body back up, trying to raise our willpower back up. So that's why the emotional body is so important for us to become aware of and for us to develop and process in this age. It's because the emotional body is the one that requires the most support. It needs non-judgment and it needs to rise so that it's no longer compelling us here unconsciously to finish the business. There's no longer unfinished business. That unfinished business is causing the addiction. And the addiction is a sign of our lost emotional body, of our lost will. Our lost willpower is causing the addiction, and that addiction is what is causing our unfinished business. You see that? I hope this has cleared up the white light. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.